What's the deal breaker here? What seems to be stopping an agreement being brokered ahead of the end of May?
Good morning, Caroline. Well, from the Greek side, there's only one deal breaker, and that is austerity. That is the latest in an op-ed from Yanis Varoufakis. He says the pressure for austerity is both subtle and steadfast, and their deadline is coming up, and yet they are remaining firm in their position. No further austerity will be imposed. Here's an important quote from Yanis Varoufakis. This is the latest we have from him. If there is potentially some daylight between Varoufakis and his prime minister, then you can see a way out of this. But when you look at this quote, it's difficult to see how that's going to happen. He said, our government cannot and will not accept a cure that has proven itself over 5 long years to be worse than the disease. Now, on a lot of this news yesterday, the Athens Exchange, the composite index, was down some 3.1% yesterday. And here in Germany, you're having an emerging consensus. Wolfgang Schäuble, in an interview with German radio, talked about how the blame was squarely with the Greeks. The view here, guys, is that if Greece wants to compromise, if Tsipras wants to cut a deal, it's up to the Greeks, but the Germans certainly aren't going to go any further. And then yesterday as well, Oliver Blanchard, he is the IMF chief economist. He seemed to blame Greece for their overly generous pension system and too many civil servants. It doesn't look like there's going to be any give from the IMF either. Caroline?
And so clearly Varoufakis talking tough. But what about Tsipras, of course? What about the standing in his very own party? Does he have the mandate, really, to get this through?
So Syriza had sort of a 100-day status check on how they've done yesterday. It was a big, long meeting. The left platform, which has about 30 members within that Syriza coalition. Remember, Syriza has a 12-vote margin in that 300-seat parliament. They put forward a vote, and the vote was to say, do you want to default on IMF payments or stay true to our principles and not compromise? Now, that vote failed, but it failed by a vote of 95 to 75. That means there is a rump caucus of 75 potentially within the Greek parliament that doesn't want to compromise their principles, even if it means defaulting to the IMF. This is going to be center stage at this G7 finance ministers meeting that takes place here in Germany in Dresden, just a little bit south here. Wolfgang Schäuble looks like he'll be holding the line that austerity needs to be implemented and needs to continue to be implemented. We'll see whether or not the Americans and others can try to make this demand argument to this demand side argument. Clearly, the fault lines are laid bare. We just have to see how this is going to fall out. Caroline?